The first time I realized I might actually be in love with my best friend. I was sitting under fluorescent hospital lights at 2 in the morning, eating crackers from a vending machine, and pretending I wasn't about to throw up from fear. Which was inconvenient. Because, at the time, we were not dating. We had never officially dated. We had, however, slept together, gone on several suspiciously romantic trips, cooked dinner together most nights, met each other's families, lived under the same roof for 3 years, and discussed every person we were dating in exhausting detail. So, naturally, we were just friends. Very healthy, very normal. Absolutely no emotional red flags here. The emergency room doors opened, and my head snapped up so fast I nearly gave myself a second medical crisis. A nurse walked out. Not for me. I sank back into the plastic chair and stared at my phone. No new messages. Across the waiting room, an old man was sleeping with his head on his wife's shoulder. She had one hand wrapped around his wrist, like she needed to feel his pulse even while he slept. I looked away. Then I looked back. And suddenly, every stupid conversation I'd ever had with Franky came rushing into my head. The night he told me we would probably be happy together. For a year. The way I had laughed because crying in front of the man rejecting you is apparently considered poor form. The 3 years I spent convincing myself I was over him. The dates. The almost relationships. The men I swiped right on because they seemed emotionally available, only to discover that emotionally available apparently meant replying to texts within 48 business hours. And through all of it, Franky had stayed. My emergency contact. My favorite person. The guy who knew I hated cilantro, loved terrible reality TV, and always needed exactly 10 minutes alone after a bad day before I was willing to admit I had feelings. A doctor appeared at the end of the hallway. This time, he said my name. I stood so quickly, the vending machine crackers hit the floor. And in that moment, before he told me whether Franky was okay, one thought cut through everything else. I had spent years being afraid that loving him would ruin our friendship. But, sitting there, I finally understood something much worse. I might lose him without ever having been brave enough to tell him the truth. 6 years earlier, I had made the completely reasonable decision to sleep with a guy from my friend group. By reasonable, I mean the kind of decision you make at 1 in the morning after 2 margaritas, 1 tequila shot you absolutely did not need, and several months of pretending not to notice that a certain man had very nice forearms. His name was Franky. At the time, he wasn't my best friend. Honestly, I wouldn't even have ranked him in my top 5. We had the same group of friends, which meant I saw him at birthday parties, crowded bars, game nights, and the occasional brunch where everyone spent $45 to eat eggs while complaining about being broke. Franky was funny, annoyingly calm, and one of those people who could walk into a room wearing a plain gray t-shirt and somehow make it seem like the t-shirt industry had been invented specifically for him. I found this irritating, mostly because I noticed. Things between us first crossed the friendship line after Daniel's birthday party. There were 12 of us packed into a booth meant for 6, shouting over music and passing around drinks nobody remembered ordering. At some point, Franky leaned close to my ear. "You know you've been stealing my fries for 20 minutes. I looked down. My hand was, in fact, inside his basket. That sounds like an accusation. It is. Do you have evidence? He pointed at the fry, currently halfway to my mouth. I ate it while maintaining eye contact. Circumstantial, he laughed. And that was pretty much the beginning of the end of my good judgment. Later that night, we shared a ride home because we lived in the same general direction. That was the official explanation. The unofficial explanation was that I had spent the last hour noticing his hand resting dangerously close to mine on the seat between us. When the car stopped outside my apartment, I opened the door. Franky looked at me. I looked at Franky. Neither of us moved. The driver looked at both of us in the rearview mirror, with the exhausted expression of a man who had watched this exact romantic disaster unfold 17 times that evening. "So," Franky said. "So, you getting out?" "Probably." "Cool." "Yeah." I continued sitting there. The driver sighed. "Ma'am, I do have another pickup." And that was how my casual relationship with Franky began. Not with passion, mystery, or cinematic rain, but with an irritated rideshare driver asking us to please figure out whatever was happening between us somewhere else. Very romantic. The next morning, Franky was in my kitchen making coffee. I stood in the doorway wearing an oversized college t-shirt and the expression of someone reviewing security footage from the previous night. He held up a mug. "Coffee? You know how to use my coffee maker? I'm gifted. That machine has defeated 3 of my roommates. Maybe your roommates are stupid. They're my friends. They can be both." I took the mug. It was exactly how I liked it. I stared at him. He raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing." But something small and inconvenient fluttered beneath my ribs. I ignored it, because this was casual. Casual people could make coffee. Casual people could remember how much cream someone used. Probably. We established rules 2 days later. No expectations. No jealousy. No weirdness in the friend group. And, most importantly, no feelings. The fact that we needed to formally discuss the absence of feelings should have been my first clue that we were both idiots. For the first few weeks, everything worked perfectly. He would text, "You awake?" I would stare at the message for exactly 30 seconds so I didn't look too eager. Then reply, "Unfortunately." Sometimes I went to his apartment. Sometimes he came to mine. Nobody stayed for breakfast. Except when we did. But breakfast didn't mean anything. Then we started getting dinner before hooking up. But dinner also didn't mean anything. One Thursday, we went to see a movie because we were already downtown and it was raining. That definitely didn't mean anything. The next weekend, he came with me to IKEA because I needed a bookshelf. That should have meant something. Nobody goes to IKEA casually. IKEA is where relationships go to be stress-tested under fluorescent lighting. At one point, we stood in the middle of the warehouse arguing over a bookshelf. "The white one is better," I said. "The brown one matches your desk." "My desk is ugly." "So why did you buy it?" "I was 22. That's not a defense." It is absolutely a defense. At 22, I also dated a man who owned 3 swords. Franky blinked. "Decorative?" "No." He slowly put the brown bookshelf back. "White it is." That night, we assembled it together on my living room floor. By together, I mean Franky assembled it while I held the instruction manual upside down and provided moral support. "You're missing a screw," I said. "I'm not." "There's one left. Extra screw." "They give you extra screws?" "Sometimes." "That feels irresponsible." He looked at me. "You dated a man with 3 swords. Can we stop weaponizing my past?" He laughed so hard he dropped the screwdriver. I remember watching him sitting on my floor, laughing, one hand over his face. And there it was again. That little flutter beneath my ribs. Except this time, it stayed longer. Things got worse after that. Or better. Depending on whether you enjoy watching someone slowly create their own emotional crisis. We started texting every day. Not sexy texts. That would have been easier. Instead, he sent me pictures of badly spelled restaurant signs and videos of dogs wearing shoes. I sent him screenshots of terrible dating profiles even though I had quietly stopped using the apps. He knew when I had a difficult meeting at work. I knew when he had to call his mother. He started keeping sparkling water in his refrigerator because I liked it. I bought the hot sauce he always put on eggs. One night, we were supposed to meet everyone at a bar. I had a terrible day at work. My boss had spent 40 minutes criticizing a project and then ended the meeting by saying, But overall, great job. Which is corporate language for emotional hit and run. I texted Franky, not coming tonight, going to eat cereal and become one with my couch. His reply came immediately. Sounds healthy. Very. 20 minutes later, someone knocked on my door. Franky stood there holding takeout. I stared at him. What are you doing here? You said you were eating cereal. Yes. That sounded depressing. It's Honey Nut Cheerios. I stand corrected. A luxury. He walked past me and put the food on the counter. Aren't you supposed to be at the bar? I told them I'd be late. Why? He glanced at me like the answer was obvious. Because you had a bad day. There are moments when your brain understands something before your heart is willing to sign the paperwork. That was one of mine. I stood there barefoot in sweatpants, holding the door open to an empty hallway, while Franky unpacked noodles in my kitchen. My chest felt strangely tight. I closed the door. Then I did what any emotionally mature woman would do. I ignored the feeling completely. For another 3 months, we became experts at pretending our situationship was normal. We went out for drinks alone. We tried new restaurants. We spent entire Sundays watching bad movies on his couch. Once, during a horror movie, I fell asleep with my head on his shoulder. When I woke up 2 hours later, the television was showing the Netflix home screen. Franky was still sitting in exactly the same position. You could have moved me, I mumbled. You looked comfortable. My neck hurts. Then you looked comfortably injured. I lifted my head. His face was suddenly very close to mine. Neither of us said anything. My stomach performed a full gymnastics routine. Then he reached over and brushed something from my hair. Popcorn. Right. I stood up too quickly. My knee hit the coffee table. Hard. Franky winced. You okay? Perfect. You're limping. I walk like this now. That was around the time I finally admitted the truth to myself. Not gracefully, of course. There was no beautiful sunrise, no romantic song, no cinematic realization. I was standing in a grocery store. Franky had texted me, "Do we need more coffee?" We. One stupid word. I stared at the message between frozen vegetables and breakfast cereal, while my heartbeat suddenly became very interested in ruining my afternoon. Because Franky knew what coffee I drank, and I knew what cereal he hated. Because he had a toothbrush at my apartment. Because I had a phone charger at his. Because I could recognize his footsteps outside my door. Because somewhere between no expectations and arguing over IKEA furniture, this had stopped feeling casual to me. I typed, "Yes, get the dark roast." Then I put my phone in my pocket and stood very still. A woman pushing a shopping cart gave me a concerned look. I smiled at her. She moved away faster. Fair. Because I had just realized I was falling in love with my friend with benefits. And, according to our very clear and extremely intelligent rules, that was the one thing I was absolutely not supposed to do. For the next 2 weeks, I handled my emotional crisis with the maturity of a woman who had once ignored a check engine light for 6 months because the car was still technically moving. I did nothing. Absolutely nothing. I did not tell Franky. I did not tell my friends. I did not even tell myself in complete sentences. Instead, I used vague internal phrases like, "This is probably fine," and "Maybe I'm just attached," and my personal favorite, "Hormones are weird." Meanwhile, Franky kept being Franky. He sent me memes during meetings. He remembered which days I had presentations at work. He started showing up with my favorite sparkling water without asking. Once, I mentioned that my kitchen light had been flickering. The next evening, he appeared at my apartment with a replacement bulb and a screwdriver. I stood in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "You said your light was broken." "It's not broken, it's flickering." That's how broken starts. "You drove across town for a light bulb?" He looked at me. "Do you want me to leave?" I stepped aside. "No." "Then stop interrogating the electrician." You are not an electrician, correct? So maybe stay nearby. That was the problem. It wasn't the physical part. Honestly, that would have been easier. The casual part had rules. It had boundaries. This was coffee in the morning, takeout when I had a bad day, someone remembering that I had a dentist appointment on Thursday and texting me afterward to ask if I survived. It was becoming domestic in tiny, dangerous ways. And the worst part was that I liked it. A lot. One Friday night, I went to Franky's apartment expecting our usual routine. Dinner, movie. Making fun of the movie. Pretending we had not accidentally built a relationship without discussing it. But when I arrived, something was different. Franky was quiet. Not relaxed quiet. Not tired quiet. He was sitting at the end of the couch, turning his phone over in his hands. Screen up. Screen down. Screen up. I put my bag on the chair. What? He looked at me. What? You're being weird. I'm not. You haven't insulted the movie once. He glanced at the television. A man had just jumped from a moving motorcycle onto a helicopter. Franky frowned. That's impossible. Too late, you missed your window. He smiled, but it disappeared quickly. My stomach tightened. There it was. The emotional smoke alarm. Franky reached for the remote and muted the television. I immediately hated that. Nothing good happens when a man mutes a television and turns his whole body toward you. I've been thinking. Oh no. He gave me a look. Can you be serious? I can try. Emily. Fine. I sat down. He rubbed his palms together once. Then again. I watched him. Something cold moved slowly through my chest. I think we should stop sleeping together. There are sentences that arrive gently. That one did not. It landed directly in my ribs. I stared at him. Okay. Franky frowned. Okay? Yeah. That's it? I shrugged. My shoulders felt disconnected from the rest of my body. You said we should stop, so, okay. It's not because I don't like you. I laughed once. Of course. The national anthem of rejection. It's fine. No, I mean it. Franky, I'm serious. I looked at the frozen television screen. The helicopter was still exploding. Honestly, relatable. Franky leaned forward, elbows on his knees. My life is kind of a mess right now. I said nothing. I'm trying to figure out work. I nodded. My finances are bad. Another nod. I don't even know what I'm doing next year. Okay. He looked at me. I'm not in a place for a relationship. The word relationship sat between us. I picked at a loose thread on my sleeve. We're not in a relationship. I know. Great. That's kind of the problem. My fingers stopped moving. I looked at him. Franky exhaled. This doesn't feel casual anymore. My heartbeat kicked once. Hard. I smiled. Because apparently, self-defense came in the form of sarcasm. Congratulations, you've discovered friendship. I'm serious. So am I. No, you're making jokes. That is something I do. You do it when you don't want to talk about something. That irritated me, mostly because it was true. I stood up. Maybe I just don't think this needs to be a dramatic conversation. He stood too. I'm not trying to make it dramatic. You muted the TV. What? That's dramatic behavior. Emily. What? Can you please just listen? I folded my arms. Go ahead. He looked at me for a long moment. I care about you. My jaw tightened. That sounds dangerous. I'm trying to be honest. Then be honest. I am. No. Honest would be saying whether you want me or not. He went still. The room suddenly felt smaller. Franky looked down. I don't know what I want. That hurt more than I expected. I laughed quietly. Wow. I know how that sounds. Do you? Yes. Because from here, it sounds like I'm good enough to sleep with, have dinner with, spend weekends with, fix furniture with. That's not fair. No? No. He stepped closer. I'm stopping this, because I know I can't give you more. I swallowed. I didn't ask for more. His eyes met mine. You didn't have to. Silence. That was the moment. The exact second I realized he knew. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the full embarrassing extent of it. But enough. I looked away. That's convenient. What is? You deciding what I need without asking me. Franky's jaw tightened. I'm trying not to hurt you. I laughed again. Thin this time. How's that going? He flinched. Good. I immediately hated myself for enjoying it. Franky lowered his voice. I'm not doing this because I don't care. I know. My voice cracked on the last word. I looked down. That was the worst part. I did know. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't ghosting me. He wasn't breadcrumbing me, while keeping 3 other women on some imaginary roster. He was overwhelmed. Uncertain. Scared of promising something he didn't think he could maintain. And somehow that made it harder to hate him. I reached for my bag. Franky stepped closer. Please don't leave like this. I looked at him. How exactly should I leave? I don't know. Smiling? That's not what I meant. I know. I put the strap over my shoulder. He rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. I still want you in my life. I stared at him. There should be laws against saying things like that during rejection. Of course you do. His face changed. What does that mean? It means you get to stop the complicated part and keep the convenient part. That's not how I see you. Maybe not. Emily. I shook my head. I need to go. He said my name again as I reached the door. I stopped. For one stupid second, hope rose in my chest. I turned. Franky stood in the middle of the room. His hands hung uselessly at his sides. I'm sorry. That was it. Not stay. Not I changed my mind. Not let's figure this out. Just sorry. I nodded. Yeah. Then I left. In the hallway, I pressed the elevator button 3 times, as if urgency could make the building move faster. The doors opened. I stepped inside. The second they closed, my face crumpled. I covered my mouth with one hand and stared at my reflection in the metal doors. Mascara under my eyes. Hair a mess. One earring missing. Perfect. I had officially graduated from casual situationship to emotional disaster. And the worst part? Franky had not rejected me because there was nothing between us. He had rejected me because there was something. Something neither of us knew how to handle. So I did what any smart, emotionally healthy woman would do. I told myself I would get over him. Then, somehow, I became his best friend instead. Becoming Franky's best friend was not part of my recovery plan. To be fair, I didn't really have a recovery plan. I had vague intentions involving distance, emotional growth, and possibly becoming one of those women who went to Pilates at 6 in the morning and drank green juice voluntarily. Instead, 3 days after our breakup, that wasn't technically a breakup, Franky texted me a picture of a dog wearing sunglasses. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Then replied, he looks emotionally unavailable. Franky. So, your type. I hated that I laughed. That was how it started. Not dramatically. No grand reconciliation. No speech about preserving our friendship. We just kept talking. At first, less often. Then more. Then, every day again. But something had changed. There were boundaries now. Actual ones. He stopped staying over. I stopped pretending casual physical affection was casual. We ended the casual part of whatever we had, which was probably healthy. Emotionally confusing, but healthy. Like kale. I was not happy about it, but people kept telling me it was good for me. We started spending time together in groups again. Then, alone. Coffee, lunch, running errands. Very safe, very platonic activities. One Saturday, I called him because my car was making a strange noise. What kind of noise? A bad one. That is not helpful. It sounds expensive. Still not helpful. 20 minutes later, he was standing beside my car with the hood open. I leaned against the driver's door. Do you know what you're looking at? No. Then why are you staring at it like that? Confidence. Useful. He looked at me. You called me. I panicked. I know. And there it was. The problem. Franky knew me. Not in the romantic way I wanted, in something almost worse. He knew when my sarcasm meant I was fine. He knew when it meant I was embarrassed. And he knew when it meant I was 2 minutes away from crying in public. I knew him too. I knew he got quiet before phone calls with his father. I knew he cleaned when he was stressed. I knew that when he said, "I'm tired," there were at least 5 different meanings and only one involved sleep. Without sex in the middle of everything, we somehow became closer, which felt deeply unfair. I had been told distance was supposed to help. Apparently, I had misunderstood and accidentally subscribed to emotional intimacy instead. Months passed. Franky started fixing the things in his life that had made him pull away. Work stabilized. Money got less chaotic. He stopped speaking about the future like it was an approaching natural disaster. And somehow, through all of that, I became the person he called first. He became mine too. Then, our friend group planned a 2-week international trip. Originally, 4 people were going. Then one friend couldn't get time off. Another had a family emergency. Suddenly, it was just Franky and me. I remember staring at the group chat. Sarah texted me privately. "You're still going?" I replied, "Yes." She sent, "With him." Yes. Alone. I know how numbers work, Sarah. 3 dots appeared. This feels unwise. I stared at the message. Then typed, "It's fine. We're friends." Her reply came immediately. Right. I ignored the obvious judgment in that one word. The trip was a terrible idea. I mean, it was an amazing trip. Which was exactly why it was terrible. We spent 2 weeks wandering through unfamiliar streets, taking trains we almost missed, eating food we couldn't pronounce, and sharing the kind of small moments that make people on dating shows say things like, "I could really see a future here." We were not dating. I reminded myself of this frequently. Usually while Franky was doing something deeply unhelpful to my emotional recovery. Like remembering which pastry I had liked from a bakery 3 days earlier. Or carrying my bag when my shoulder hurt. Or standing beside me at sunset while a street musician played something slow and romantic. I crossed my arms. This is manipulative. Franky looked over. What? I nodded toward the musician. The atmosphere. He looked around. Did the city plan this specifically to upset you? Possibly. You're very important. I've always suspected that. He smiled. I looked away. My heart did something stupid. One night, we got lost walking back to the hotel. The streets were almost empty. My phone had 3% battery. Franky had confidently insisted we were going in the right direction for 20 minutes. We were not. You said you knew the way. I thought I did. You said, and I quote, "Trust me." That was my mistake. Your mistake was being wrong. That too. I stopped under a streetlight. We are going to die here. We're 10 minutes from the hotel. You said that 15 minutes ago. Time is subjective. Not when you're lost. He started laughing. I tried not to. Failed. A few minutes later, we found the hotel. It had been 1 block away. We stood outside the entrance in silence. Franky looked at me. You were very brave. I hate you. No, you don't. My smile disappeared before I could stop it. Franky's did too. For a second, neither of us moved. The city noise seemed far away. He looked like he was about to say something. My heartbeat climbed into my throat. Then he stepped back. We should get some sleep. I smiled too quickly. Definitely. That was the trip. 2 weeks of almost moments. Almost conversations. Almost touching. Almost saying the thing neither of us wanted to say. By the time we came home, I was exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. There are only so many romantic sunsets a woman can survive with a man who insists they are just friends. A week later, Franky asked me to dinner. Just us. The restaurant was loud, but he was quiet. Too quiet. I put down my fork. You're thinking. I do that sometimes. Dangerous. He smiled briefly, then looked down at his glass. I want to talk about the trip. My stomach tightened. Okay. I had a really good time. That sounds ominous. It's not supposed to. People always say something nice before saying something terrible. He sighed. Can you let me finish? I leaned back. Go ahead. Franky rubbed his thumb against the side of the glass. I know things between us can be... He searched for the word. Complicated? Yeah. You can say emotionally disastrous. I won't be offended. He looked at me. I care about you. My chest tightened. Franky, I'm serious. That's the problem. He looked down. I waited. Then he said it. I still don't think we should date. There it was. Again. The second rejection. Except this time, he had no messy job situation to hide behind. No financial chaos. No uncertain future. Just us. I put my fork down carefully. Why? He exhaled. I've thought about it. That's comforting. Emily. No. Really. Explain it to me. He was quiet for so long I could hear glasses clinking at the next table. Finally, he said, I think we'd be happy. I stared at him. You have a strange way of rejecting someone. I know. How happy? He looked confused. What? Well, apparently there's a problem, so I'm trying to understand the math. He looked away. I think we'd be happy for a year. I blinked. A year? Maybe longer. Generous. I'm trying to be honest. Why 1 year? I don't know. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my nervous system apparently needed a laugh track. So, just to clarify, you think we have chemistry? Yes. We care about each other? Yes. We get along? Yes. We already knew the attraction wasn't the problem. He looked around. Can you lower your voice? No. A couple at the next table suddenly became very interested in their bread. I continued. So all of that works? Yes. But according to your internal relationship weather forecast, there's a storm coming in 12 months. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? He leaned forward. I think eventually something would go wrong. What? I don't know. Very convincing. And I know myself. I crossed my arms. Apparently better than you know both of us. He looked frustrated. If I was unhappy, I don't think I'd leave when I should. I paused. Why? Because I wouldn't want to hurt you. The anger in me stopped for half a second, then returned. So your solution is to hurt me now. He looked down. I immediately hated the way his face changed. Franky was never cruel. That was what made all of this so difficult. He wasn't keeping me around for sex. He wasn't breadcrumbing me. He wasn't using me as emotional backup while dating half the city. He genuinely believed not trying was the kinder option, which was completely insane, but sincere. I leaned back. So what happens now? I don't know. Good plan. I want you in my life. I laughed quietly. Of course. His jaw tightened. What does that mean? It means you want the safe version. That's not fair, isn't it? He didn't answer. I looked at him. I'm going to date other people. He nodded. Too quickly. Of course. And you should too. Yeah. And if I meet someone serious, I know. His voice changed. Barely. But I noticed. I always noticed. For the next few months, I tried to move on. Really tried. I went on dates. Some were fine. Some made me question whether humanity should continue. One man spent 40 minutes explaining cryptocurrency to me after I explicitly said I had no interest in cryptocurrency. Another told me he was not looking for anything serious, and then became upset when I did not text him good morning. Modern dating was going extremely well. Meanwhile, Franky and I remained close. Too close. Then, the housing conversation started. Rent was getting ridiculous. One night, a few of us were complaining about it over drinks when Daniel mentioned a house coming available. 5 bedrooms. Good location. Much cheaper split between people. Franky looked at me. You should move in. I laughed. No. Why? Do you really need me to explain that? Daniel looked between us. I feel like I missed something. You missed nothing, Franky said. Great, I said. Very healthy answer. But the idea didn't disappear. Financially, it made sense. I already spent half my free time with those people anyway. It wasn't Franky and me moving in together. It was 5 friends sharing a house. Completely different. That was what I told myself. Then one night, I imagined Franky bringing a woman home. I saw it clearly. The front door opening. His voice in the hallway. A woman's laugh. His bedroom door closing. My stomach dropped so hard I actually sat down. That was when I realized the truth. I was not as over him as I had been pretending. Not even close. A few days later, I told Franky. The conversation lasted maybe 30 seconds. I need to say something. He looked up from his phone. Okay. If we live together and you bring women home, I'm probably going to hate it. He was quiet. I figured. That doesn't seem good. No. Do you still think we shouldn't date? Yes. Immediate. Clean. Painful. I looked away. Franky continued. The chemistry is there. I laughed. Again with the positive review. I care about you. Franky. I just still think the relationship would end badly. 1 year. He looked uncomfortable. Something like that. I nodded. Right. Right. And somehow, after all of that, I still moved into the house. 5 friends, 1 kitchen, 1 refrigerator, and 1 truly spectacular collection of unresolved emotional problems. What could possibly go wrong? Moving in with Franky turned out to be both less dramatic and more emotionally dangerous than I expected. Less dramatic because the house was always full. There were 5 of us. Someone was constantly cooking, showering, arguing over whose turn it was to buy toilet paper, or leaving exactly 1 tablespoon of milk in the refrigerator so they wouldn't technically have to replace it. Romance had very little room to breathe. Emotional dysfunction, however, was thriving. Franky and I settled into a routine almost immediately. Too immediately. We cooked together most nights. We split grocery runs. We watched shows on the couch. We argued about whether leftovers were still safe to eat. Sometimes I would come home after a bad date and find him in the kitchen. He would look at my face. That bad? I'd drop my bag on the floor. He said women are biologically less funny than men. Franky stared at me. Did you leave? After dessert. Why after dessert? It was crème brûlée. Fair. Then he would hand me a fork and let me eat directly from whatever pan he had made dinner in. And that was the problem. Dating other people is difficult when your favorite person is at home making pasta. Still, I tried. For 3 years. Not dramatically. Not with some grand mission to make Franky jealous. I just kept going. There were dating apps, talking stages, men who were perfectly nice and somehow made me feel absolutely nothing. Men who made me feel too much and then vanished like unpaid magicians. One guy ghosted me after 4 dates and continued watching every Instagram story I posted for 8 months. That kind of commitment should honestly be studied. Franky dated too. We talked about it. Like friends. Actual friends. He told me when a date went badly. I helped him choose restaurants. Once, I told him a shirt made him look like a substitute geography teacher. He changed immediately. You could have said it looked bad. I did. You said I looked employed. In public education. He threw the shirt at me. I laughed. Then helped him choose another one for a date with someone else. That was when I realized something strange. It still hurt, but not the way it used to. The pain had become duller, more familiar. Less like getting stabbed and more like sleeping on a bad mattress. Unpleasant, but survivable. And then COVID happened. Suddenly, 5 adults who had carefully built separate social lives were trapped inside one house together. Time stopped meaning anything. We baked bread. We bought plants. We killed most of the plants. We had themed dinner nights because by week 7, apparently wearing a Hawaiian shirt to eat tacos counted as an event. And somewhere during lockdown, because my emotional judgment had always been a deeply experimental process, I briefly had a casual thing with another roommate. Let's call him Noah. Yes, another roommate. I know. Apparently my solution to complicated boundaries was simply to remove them from the house entirely. It was casual, mutual, short-lived, and surprisingly undramatic. Noah and I talked about it afterward, agreed we were better as friends, and somehow became even closer. Franky knew. Everyone knew. There are very few secrets in a house with 5 adults and 1 bathroom wall thin enough to hear someone sneeze. The strange thing was that Franky never made it a problem. He didn't interrogate me. He didn't act possessive. He didn't suddenly behave like I belonged to him. But something shifted. Small things. He stopped asking questions when I mentioned dates. He became quieter when Noah and I laughed over some private joke. Once, during dinner, Noah reached across me for the salt, and Franky stood up so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. Everyone looked at him. He froze. I forgot water. Daniel looked at the full glass beside his plate. You have water. Franky looked down, then at the kitchen, then at us. I need different water. He walked away. Sarah slowly turned toward me. I shook my head. She raised one eyebrow. I kicked her under the table. Hard. But for once, I didn't build a fantasy out of it. That was new. Old me would have spent 3 days analyzing the chair scrape. Was he jealous? Did it mean something? Was this finally the moment? New me finished dinner. Then helped Noah wash dishes. Franky had already told me no. Twice. Whatever he felt was his responsibility. That realization changed something in me. I stopped waiting. Not all at once. There was no magical morning where I woke up cured of 6 years of emotional nonsense. It happened slowly. I stopped checking whether Franky was home before making weekend plans. I stopped comparing every date to him. I stopped treating every awkward silence as hidden evidence. I started building a future that did not automatically include him in every room. One afternoon, I sat on the porch looking at apartment listings. Sarah came outside holding coffee. You're serious? I nodded. Maybe. About moving? Yeah. She sat beside me. Why now? I looked through the window. Franky was inside, arguing with Daniel over how to load the dishwasher. I smiled. Then looked back at my phone. Because I think I'm ready. For what? To see who I am when he's not 3 rooms away. Sarah was quiet. Then she bumped her shoulder against mine. That's disgustingly healthy. I hate it. Growth looks terrible on you. Thank you. I kept looking. Not urgently. Not because I was running away. Because for the first time, leaving didn't feel like losing him. It felt like choosing myself. A week later, Franky saw one of the listings open on my laptop. You're moving? I looked over. Maybe. His face went still. Why? I laughed. People move, Franky. I know that. Do you? He crossed his arms. When were you going to tell me? When there was something to tell. You've been looking. Yes. How long? A few weeks. He nodded slowly. Then looked toward the hallway. Okay. That was all. But the house felt different after that. Franky started finding reasons to be around. Not romantic reasons. Franky reasons. Franky reasons. He asked if I wanted coffee. He joined grocery runs he normally avoided. He sat beside me on the porch one evening, without saying anything, for almost 10 minutes. Finally, I looked at him. What? Nothing. You've been staring at the same tree. It's a good tree. Franky. He rubbed his hands together. You really want to leave? I looked at him. I think so. He nodded, then stared at the yard again. I'll miss you. My chest tightened. For years, that sentence would have been enough. I would have turned it into hope. A sign. A reason to stay. This time, I smiled. I'll miss you too. And I meant it. But I didn't close the apartment listings. That was how I knew I was finally moving on. Not because I stopped loving Franky. I think some feelings leave quietly. Others just change shape. Franky had become part of my life so deeply that I no longer knew where friendship ended and love began. But for the first time, I wasn't waiting for him to choose me. I was dating, making plans, looking at apartments, thinking about what came next. And I was okay. Mostly. Then, a few months later, my phone rang in the middle of a workday. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I answered. Hey, I'm working. Her breathing was wrong. Fast. Uneven. My hand stopped over the keyboard. Sarah? It's Franky. Everything inside me went still. What happened? He's at the hospital. The phone call came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at work, halfway through pretending to understand a spreadsheet, when Sarah's name appeared on my screen. I almost ignored it. Sarah never called during work hours unless someone was dead, engaged, or crying in a Target parking lot. I answered. Hey, I'm working. You need to leave. Her voice made me sit up. What happened? It's Franky. Everything inside me stopped. My hand tightened around the phone. What about him? There was some kind of medical emergency. They took him to the hospital. Daniel went with him. I was already standing. What do you mean, medical emergency? I don't know everything yet. Is he conscious? I don't know. My chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Which hospital? She told me. I'm coming. Emily? I hung up. I don't remember shutting down my computer. I don't remember grabbing my bag. I vaguely remember my manager saying something as I rushed past him in the hallway. Then I stopped and turned around. I have to go. He looked at my face. Go. That was it. I ran. The drive should have taken 25 minutes. It took almost 40. I know because I watched every number on the GPS change like it was personally trying to destroy me. 37 minutes. 34. 39. Traffic. Of course there was traffic. I gripped the steering wheel. Move. Nobody moved. Please. Still nothing. My phone buzzed at a red light. Sarah. No update yet. I typed. Have you seen him? Her reply came quickly. No. Daniel said they're running tests. I stared at the screen. The light turned green. A horn sounded behind me. I drove. My brain opened every worst-case scenario at once. Had he been feeling sick? Had he told me something I ignored? 2 nights earlier, he had said he was exhausted. I had told him to stop staying up until 2 in the morning watching conspiracy documentaries. What if that had meant something? I called him. Straight to voicemail. I hung up before the beep, then called again. Voicemail. Come on, Franky. Nothing. At the hospital, I parked badly enough to become a public safety concern. I noticed. I did not care. Inside, everything moved too fast and too slowly at the same time. Automatic doors. Bright lights. People in scrubs. A phone ringing somewhere behind the reception desk. I walked up to the woman behind the counter. Franky. My voice disappeared. I swallowed and gave her his full name. She typed. Relationship to patient? I opened my mouth. Roommate sounded too small. Friend sounded ridiculous. Complicated history was, for several obvious reasons, not an option on the form. I'm his best friend. The words should have felt accurate. Instead, sitting there under those lights, they felt incomplete. The woman nodded. Please have a seat. Can I see him? Not yet. Is he okay? I don't have that information. Can someone tell me anything? As soon as the doctor is able to speak with you. I nodded because there was nothing else to do. Then I turned and saw Sarah. She walked toward me. I didn't ask anything. I just grabbed her. Hard. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I pulled back. What do we know? Not much. Daniel? Still waiting. Did Franky call anyone? No. I looked toward the emergency room doors. Sarah touched my arm. Sit down. I'm fine. You're shaking. I looked at my hands. She was right. We sat and waited. Waiting rooms are strange places. Time becomes useless. 5 minutes can feel like an hour. Then suddenly, 30 minutes disappears. A television played quietly in the corner. Nobody watched it. Every time the emergency room doors opened, my entire body reacted. Head up, shoulders tight, heart pounding. Then, someone else's name would be called. And I would sit back down. At some point, Sarah handed me crackers. Eat. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. I opened the package, took one bite, chewed for too long. Across the waiting room, an elderly man was asleep with his head resting against his wife's shoulder. She had one hand around his wrist. Her thumb moved slowly over his skin, back and forth, like she needed to feel that he was still there. I looked away. My throat burned. And then, because fear is cruel, my mind started giving me memories. Franky standing in my kitchen holding takeout. Because you had a bad day. Franky laughing while we got lost on that trip. Franky looking at me across a restaurant table and saying, I think we'd be happy. For a year. For years, that sentence had made me angry. Sitting in that hospital, I suddenly wanted to scream at both of us. 1 year? We had spent 6 years protecting ourselves from a hypothetical breakup. 6 years discussing risks, timing, friendship. What if? Maybe. Someday. We had treated love like a legal contract that required a guarantee before signing. And now I was sitting under fluorescent lights, realizing there had never been a guarantee for anything. Not friendship. Not health. Not tomorrow. The emergency room doors opened. I stood. A doctor walked toward us and said Franky's name. My knees nearly gave out. Sarah stood beside me. The doctor explained that the test results so far were reassuring. They wanted to monitor him a little longer. More tests. Observation. No immediate danger. Most of the words passed through me. I caught the important ones. Stable. Not immediate danger. I covered my face. A sound escaped me that was half laugh, half sob. Sarah wrapped an arm around me. I wiped my cheeks. Can I see him? briefly. When I walked into the room, Franky looked different. Not dramatically, just pale, tired, smaller somehow under the thin hospital blanket. His eyes opened when he heard me. "Hey," one word. My throat closed. I walked to the bed. "You look terrible." His mouth twitched. "Good to see you too." I sat down. For 1 second, I hesitated. Then I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine. "You scared me." My voice cracked. Franky's smile disappeared. "I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing. I didn't exactly plan this. That would be a very strange calendar event." He gave a weak laugh. I looked down at our hands. My thumb moved over his knuckles. Once. Twice. Exactly like the woman in the waiting room. Franky watched me. "Emily." I looked up. There was something different in his face. Or maybe something different in mine. For once, neither of us made a joke. I squeezed his hand. "Don't ever do that again." "I'll try." "I'm serious." "So am I." The monitor beside him kept beeping. Steady. Regular. Alive. I stayed until a nurse told me visiting time was over. Later that night, after Franky was discharged and we brought him home, the house slowly went quiet. One by one, everyone disappeared into their rooms. Everyone except me. And Franky. We sat in the living room with one small lamp on beside the couch. Neither of us spoke. For years, we had been experts at avoiding the truth. That night, for the first time, I was too tired to run from it. Franky and I sat in the dark living room for a long time without speaking. The house was finally quiet. No roommates, no television, no distractions. Just the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and Franky sitting beside me in hospital socks. Romance really knew how to dress for the occasion. I looked at him. "You scared me." "I know." "No, I don't think you do." He looked down at his hands. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself. "I sat in that waiting room not knowing if you were okay." Franky said nothing. "I kept calling your phone." His jaw tightened. And every time it went to voicemail, my brain came up with something worse. "Emily." I was terrified. My voice cracked. I looked away immediately. That was my favorite coping mechanism. Cry, then pretend the wall was fascinating. Franky leaned forward. "I'm sorry." I laughed through my nose. "You really need new material." "I know." "Seriously? You've been apologizing to me for 6 years." "That feels statistically unlikely." I looked at him. He gave me a small smile. It disappeared quickly. Then he said, "I was scared too." I frowned. "In the hospital?" "Yes." He rubbed his hands together. "But not just because of that." I waited. Franky stared at the floor. "I kept thinking about you." My chest tightened. He continued. "For years, I told myself that if we dated and it went badly, I'd lose you." I swallowed. "I remember." "I know." His voice dropped. And then I was lying there thinking, I could lose you anyway. Silence. No perfect speech. No dramatic declaration. Just that. Simple, messy, real. I looked down at my hands. That's what I realized too. Franky looked at me. I laughed softly, but there was nothing funny in it. We've spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to protect something that could disappear anyway. Yeah, very efficient. We're both idiots. I've been saying that for years. He smiled, then grew serious again. I don't know what happens if we try. My stomach tightened. Strong sales pitch. I'm serious. So am I. He looked directly at me. I still don't know if I can promise forever. I nodded. Okay. But I think I was wrong to believe I needed to know forever before starting. For once, I didn't joke. Franky moved a little closer. I want to try. My heartbeat changed. Try what? He gave me a look. Emily, I need precision. Us. The room went very quiet. I stared at him. You rejected me twice. I know. You gave our hypothetical relationship a 1-year expiration date. I know. You watched me date other people. I know. You encouraged me to date other people. He winced. That one was bad. Terrible strategy. I was committed. To stupidity? Apparently? I laughed. Then stopped. What changed? Franky looked at me for a long moment. I think I did. I waited. And I think I've been changing for a while. I just kept finding reasons not to admit it. My throat tightened. Because you were scared. Yeah. I nodded slowly. So am I. I know. That made me laugh again. Of course you do. I've known you a long time. That is deeply inconvenient. It usually is. We sat there looking at each other. 6 years of history suddenly made the distance between us feel enormous. I had wanted this moment for so long. Now that it was here, I had no idea what to do with it. Franky seemed to have the same problem. So, I said. So, this is weird. Extremely. Are you going to kiss me? I was considering it. For how long? Several years, apparently. I laughed. Then he leaned in. We had kissed before. A lot. But that had been years ago. Before rejection. Before friendship. Before roommates and dating stories and late-night conversations and learning each other so well that nothing felt casual anymore. Our noses bumped. I pulled back. Oh my God. Franky started laughing. Don't. I'm sorry. This was supposed to be romantic. It still can be. No. Momentum is gone. Emily. You hit my face. You moved. You have an aggressive head. He laughed harder. I shoved his shoulder. Then he caught my hand. The laughter faded. He looked at me. This time, neither of us moved too fast. When he kissed me, it felt familiar and completely new at the same time. His hand was warm around mine. The hospital bracelet was still around his wrist. And for the first time, neither of us pretended the moment meant nothing. Dating my best friend, however, was surprisingly hard. Not bad. Hard. There is a difference. Our first official date was painfully awkward. We went to a restaurant we had eaten at several times before. The hostess smiled. Celebrating anything special? Franky said. First date? I said. Technically, no. She looked between us. Franky cleared his throat. We've known each other for 6 years. I added, and lived together for 3. The hostess blinked. I'm going to give you 2 a minute. She walked away. I looked at Franky. Strong start. We should have stayed home. No. Normal couples go on dates. We are clearly not a normal couple. That is becoming obvious. Physical affection was weird too. Not intimacy. That had history. The weird part was everything smaller. Holding hands in public. Kissing goodbye before work. Sitting beside each other at dinner and knowing everyone knew. The first time Franky kissed my forehead in front of our roommates, I froze. Sarah saw it. Of course. She put down her drink. Are you two finally dating? I opened my mouth. Franky said, yes. Sarah nodded slowly. Finally. That's it? I asked. What do you want? A parade? A little enthusiasm. I've been emotionally watching this show for 6 seasons. Daniel walked into the room. What happened? Sarah pointed at us. They're together. Daniel looked at Franky, then at me, then held out his hand to another roommate. Pay up. I stared at them. You were betting on us? For years, Daniel said. Franky looked offended. You had a pool? Sarah shrugged. Your emotional dysfunction became community entertainment. I hated all of them. The hardest part came later. We had spent years knowing each other as friends. That meant we knew everything. I knew Frankie needed silence after stressful phone calls. He knew I made jokes when I was anxious. I knew when he said I'm fine, it sometimes meant he needed an hour. He knew when I said I'm fine, it usually meant he had approximately 30 seconds to ask again. But knowing each other as friends didn't automatically teach us how to be a couple. We had to learn how to flirt again. Which sounds ridiculous when you've already slept with someone. But after years of platonic friendship, flirting felt like trying to use a language we had once been fluent in and then abandoned. One night, Frankie looked at me while I was cooking. "You look nice." I stared at him. "I'm wearing sweatpants." "I know." "Is this flirting?" "I think so." "You're terrible at it." "I'm rusty." "Keep practicing." "Yes, ma'am." I almost dropped the spoon. Annoying. We also had to learn boundaries. As friends, we told each other everything about our dating lives. As a couple, there are apparently limits to how much detail your boyfriend wants to hear about your old talking stages. Who knew? Then, we moved out. Leaving the group house felt strange. For years, Frankie and I had lived together with 3 other people around us. There was always noise. Always someone walking into the kitchen. Always an audience. Then suddenly, it was just us in a small condo. 2 people. 1 bedroom. No buffer. Living together as roommates had been easy. Living together as a couple was apparently a different sport. As a roommate, Frankie leaving socks on the floor was annoying. As my boyfriend, it somehow became a referendum on our future. I stared at the socks one morning. Frankie walked past me. "What?" I pointed. He looked down. "Oh, is this who we are now?" "What?" "People who leave socks beside the couch." He stared at me. "Do you want me to pick them up?" "That's not the point." "What is the point?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. He waited. I sighed. "I don't know." Frankie picked up the socks. Strong conflict resolution. Therapists everywhere are impressed. But beneath the jokes, I was still afraid. Every silence felt dangerous. Every bad mood seemed like evidence. Every small disagreement made some part of me whisper, 1 year. One night, Frankie was unusually quiet. I watched him from the couch for 20 minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it. "Do you regret dating me?" His head snapped up. "What?" "Just answer." "No." You hesitated. I was confused. "Same thing." "It is absolutely not." I crossed my arms. "Then why have you been quiet?" Frankie stared at me. Then said, "I forgot to move the laundry to the dryer." I blinked. "Laundry." "Yes." "You've been sitting there silently because of laundry?" I was deciding whether I was willing to rewash it. I covered my face. "Great. What did you think was happening?" "Nothing." "Emily, maybe I thought you were reconsidering the relationship. We've been dating 2 months." "Exactly. Early performance data is volatile." Frankie moved closer. "Hey." I looked at him. "If something changes, I'll tell you." I swallowed. "You promise?" "Yes." "And I have to do the same?" He raised an eyebrow. "That is generally how relationships work." Sounds exhausting. It probably is. I leaned against him. He kissed the top of my head. The truth was, dating my best friend was surprisingly hard. Not because we didn't know each other. Because we did. We knew exactly where the weak spots were. We knew which jokes were real jokes and which ones were panic wearing a costume. For the first time, friendship was no longer a place to hide from the difficult conversations. We had to say what we wanted, what we feared, what hurt. And somehow, every time one of us told the truth, the relationship didn't fall apart. It got a little stronger. Awkwardly. Slowly. But for once, neither of us ran. Our 1-year anniversary showed up on the calendar like a meeting invite I had been pretending not to see for 12 months. There it was. 1 year. The number Frankie had once treated like an expiration date. We were still together. Still happy. Which, naturally, made me suspicious. Because anxiety does not know how to enjoy good news. It sees happiness and immediately asks, "Okay, but where's the trap?" That evening, Frankie cooked dinner in our condo while I sat at the kitchen counter pretending not to watch him. He looked over. "What?" "Nothing. You've been staring at me for 5 minutes." "I like your shirt. You bought me this shirt. I have excellent taste." He turned back to the stove. I tapped my fingers against the counter. Once. Twice. 10 times. Frankie stopped stirring the sauce. "You're doing the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you say nothing is wrong while slowly destroying a nearby object." I looked down. I had peeled almost the entire label off my beer bottle. "Cheap glue. Emily." I sighed. "Fine." He turned off the stove. My stomach dropped. "You turned off the stove?" "Yes." "That feels serious." "It's not bad." That is exactly what people say before bad things. He came over and sat beside me. "I don't think anything is wrong." I stared at him. "That is a terrible opening." "Let me finish." "Proceed carefully." Frankie reached for my hand. "I just don't want us to wait until something is wrong before we talk about it." I looked down at our fingers. Then, back at him. "Is this about the year?" His face softened. "So you've been thinking about it." Thinking is generous. Panicking? Quietly. Not that quietly. Not that quietly. I gave him a look. Frankie smiled. Then became serious again. "I love you." I swallowed. "I love you too. And I'm happy." Still a concerning amount of setup. "Emily." "Sorry." He squeezed my hand. "I think there are things I do that could hurt us if I never work on them." I waited. "Like what?" He looked down. "When I get scared, I shut down." I nodded slowly. "And sometimes I tell myself I'm protecting you by not saying what I'm thinking." "You're terrible at that." "I know. Really terrible." "Thank you." "You're welcome." He laughed softly, then looked at me. "What about you?" I blinked. "What about me? What do you need to work on?" "What do you need to work on?" I sat up straighter. "Nothing. I'm perfect." "Emily." "Fine." I looked toward the stove. The sauce was still bubbling quietly. "I still expect you to leave." Frankie didn't interrupt. "Even when you've given me no reason to think that." I rubbed my thumb against his hand. "So I read into things. You once thought I was ending the relationship because I bought a different shampoo. It smelled suspicious. It was on sale. I understand that now." He smiled. Then his expression softened. "We should probably get help." I frowned. "For what?" "Bess." My heart jumped. Frankie immediately shook his head. "Not because we're failing." That sentence did not help. "I mean, therapy." I stared at him. "You think we need couples therapy?" "I think I need therapy." He paused. "And based on the shampoo situation." I narrowed my eyes. "Careful. You might benefit too." I looked at him, then laughed. "Wow. Too soon?" "No." I shook my head. Annoyingly reasonable. That was how it started. Not with a crisis. Not with screaming. Not with one of us threatening to leave. We went to therapy because, for once, neither of us wanted to wait for things to break before learning how to take care of them. It was not magical. There was no single session where a therapist said one profound sentence and suddenly our childhoods made sense. Sometimes I left exhausted. Sometimes Frankie did. Sometimes one of us was quiet in the car afterward. But slowly, We got better at saying simple things. The first time I said, "I need reassurance," out loud, I almost laughed halfway through the sentence. Franky didn't. He just looked at me. "Okay. That's it? What do you need?" I blinked. "Oh, Emily? I didn't think this far ahead." He smiled. "Take your time." Franky had his own moments. One night, after a hard day, he stood in the kitchen, looking like he wanted to disappear into the wall. Normally, he would have said he was tired. Instead, he rubbed both hands over his face. "I'm overwhelmed." I waited. Then said, "Do you want space or company?" He thought about it. Company, but quiet company. So I sat beside him on the couch. No jokes, no interrogation, just there. It sounds small. It wasn't. We learned to say, "That hurt. I'm scared. I need a minute. Please ask again. I don't know what I feel yet." And somehow, honesty didn't destroy us. It made everything easier. Not perfect. Easier. 3 years later, Franky was stretched across our couch with our cat asleep on his chest. I sat beside him looking at hotels for a weekend in New York. "This one has better reviews." He glanced at my screen. "This one has free breakfast." "We can afford breakfast." "Free tastes better." The cat opened one eye. I looked at Franky. "You know, you were right." He frowned. "About what?" "We were happy for 1 year." His expression changed. Then I smiled. "And then we got even happier." He groaned. "That was terrible." "You loved it." "I did." I leaned over and kissed him. For years, I thought love was about finding the right person at the right time. Now I think sometimes you find the right person too early. Before you're ready. Before they're ready. And then, if you're lucky, life gives both of you enough time to become people who can finally choose each other without running. Franky once believed loving me would cost him his best friend. Instead, I got to keep mine. I just also got the boyfriend. And the cat. Honestly, the cat may still be the best part of the deal.